Hi, so during this session, we're going to talk about all things locking in talent, all things retention, and how that can really impact on risk and cost in your organisation. We're going to talk about, we're going to have a look at why resignations are so painful in an organisation. And kind of what's going on in the marketplace at the moment. And then we're going to talk about employee engagement and at kind of the risk of uh, spoiling my own kind of content. Actually, whilst we are going to talk about a retention strategy and a retention plan, really what that is an employee engagement plan, because we need to be thinking about prevention rather than cure. Talk a little bit about HR tech at the end. Without further ado, let's get stuck in. So I'm Victoria, I'm the CEO of Space HR, and the work that we do at Space HR is everything around employee engagement. So employee engagement, performance, retention of employees, teams, in order to kind of drive performance of an organisation. We've built a tech platform that helps us really efficiently and in a really engaging way capture employee feedback, and we use that feedback in order to understand employee engagement in an organisation and use that to kind of drive improvement. And we see that translate into better retention rates, better performance in organisations. So that's the work that I do. I'm also, my background is actually HR as a HR professional, mergers and acquisitions, startups, tech, large corporate, kind of broad range of sectors that I've worked in, as well as HR Directors Cup podcast that I co-host as well. So you can check me out on there, and I'll put some contact details up at the end as well. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so finding and retaining talent is a huge challenge across all industries, and actually, I think that's probably a bit of an understatement. So, of the HR teams that I talk to, it's probably the number one challenge that they are facing at the moment, and there's a real kind of concern around locking in that talent so that we don't need to be concerned about replacing them, which we also know is incredibly challenging. So let's have a look at let's dive in there and have a look at some of the things that are going on. So this kind of stat is a scary one, which is 1 in 5 employees are considering changing jobs in the next 12 months. So the way that I kind of like to picture that for myself is I've got my team meeting, there's 10 employees sat around a table, and 2 of those employees that are sat around the table with me potentially not there in the next 12 months. And that's major, that's 2 lots of people's roles that might not get done for a period of time while we replace them, or we have lower productivity. That's 2 lots of colleagues that I've got to say goodbye to. That's 2 lots of skills and knowledge and experience that's kind of walking out of my organisation. So that kind of 1 in 5 stat is really significant, and a lot of what is driving that is one, choice in the marketplace from a candidate perspective, but 2, there is some real push factors that are pushing employees out of organisations as well, and pulling them towards organisations. A lot of that is about employee engagement and employees leaving environments that they don't want to be in to join organisations that they do. There are so I talked about choice there, and there are currently 1.3 million vacancies in the UK, and we actually have more unemployed people in the workforce than we do we've got more vacancies in the UK than we have unemployed people in the workforce. And of course, it's not a direct match, is it? It's not, we've got somebody who's unemployed and we put them over here in this job. But actually the kind of net impact of that is a really great indicator of whether it's a candidate marketplace, and it absolutely is. And we're seeing a lot of talent are being tempted out of organisations by big salaries or more attractive kind of workplaces and more attractive engagement. And the impact of that is significant. I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about the cost of a resignation, But the cost to the UK overall, the kind of lack of talent that we've got, and those difficulty of struggling of filling those vacancies, the estimated cost is around 6.3 billion currently. And that's things like extra recruitment fees, it's extra training fees where we've had to, where we've under recruited somebody and we're having to train them up. So, you know, it's significant. And if you're kind of sat there thinking, this is a huge challenge for me, you know, you aren't alone. You aren't alone. So why are resignations so painful? So I did a bit of a diagram of this, if you like, do a bit of a picture. And I think there's so much more pain that surrounds a resignation than, you know, a little bit of time of somebody potentially leaving a vacancy, or, you know, once that resignation letter's landed on your desk. So let's kind of peel it back. So we've got a disengaged employee. You know, potentially there's kind of 3 months there where they're unhappy and thinking of resigning. And we know that we're not going to get the best out of them during that time. They're unhappy, they're disengaged, you know, they're thinking of resigning. So we know that we're not going to get the best out of them in terms of performance. We then might have another 3 months where they've made that decision, they're looking for another job. You know, we're definitely not going to get the best out of them whilst they're doing job applications and, you know, and completing cover letters, etc. Then we've got a resignation that lands on our desk and it all kind of becomes clear why we've not been getting the best out of that person for the last couple of months, because they've been disengaged. Then they might be working their notice, or they might even be on garden leave. So again, we're definitely not getting the best out of them during the next 3 months maybe. Then if we're lucky enough, we might have a new employee and we might be focusing on getting them up to speed. That might be another 3 months where we've got an employee who's kind of working at below their maximum potential through kind of no fault of their own, just being new into the organisation. And so all in, kind of end to end, that's possibly kind of 12 months worth of real pain and low performance, below capacity performance that might surround a resignation of an individual. And so you can imagine when you pile those on top of each other in an organisation, the cumulative impact of this is really, really significant. So what is that cost that I talked about? So I did a real quick bit of maths, and, you know, I've kind of had a look at a £30,000 role and the cost of a resignation of that role. So typical salary, low productivity, we talk about that. So maybe thinking about those low productivity periods, maybe that's kind of 50% of salary for 3 months, maybe £3,750, say. Then there might be a recruitment fee, kind of modestly 10%. Some agency fees we know are higher than that, but you might also, on the other hand, get referrals that might cost you very little, or there might be some payments, smaller payments that you make for referrals, etc. So I've kind of gone a little bit in the middle with 10%. So that's kind of an additional £3,000. Then that cost of training and induction. So maybe that is time, people's time, maybe it's actual physical cash that you need to spend on people's time and induction. Maybe there's some cost that sits behind an induction plan. So again, let's call it kind of 50% of a salary for 3 months, £3,750. So I think without even trying, you can kind of get up to a cost of kind of a third of salary for a 30k role, for resignation and replacement of that role without kind of even trying. So, you know, again, if we're layering these up across an organisation because we've got a disengaged team and, you know, we've got multiple people who are in that kind of resignation zone, exit zone, then, you know, the cost and the impact of this really does start to add up. The reality is, I've talked about that kind of disengagement. The reality is that only 2 in 10 employees are actively engaged in the workplace. So again, that kind of table of 10, and you've got your team meeting, that team of 10, only 2 of them are like, woo, I'm pumped and I'm ready to be here. The others are maybe kind of moderately engaged. Hopefully you haven't got too many in the actively disengaged part, which is kind of your exit zone over there. but that's quite a scary stat. So, that kind of 2 in 10 actively engaged employees. So, this is the work that we do at Space HR, is turning that 2 into 3, into 4, into 5, etc. In order to start to improve employee engagement across the entire organisation, and that really brings down our retention risks in teams and individuals. And so when we're talking about a retention strategy, then these are the kind of the key 3 areas that I want to talk about in terms of building up a retention strategy, which is what we're going to talk about now. So, employee engagement, we're going to talk about an employee engagement model and talk about building for the future and what the future of the workplace looks like. And then we're going to talk about HR tech and how that can help as well. But for now, what I want you to imagine is your organisation is a bucket, and your employees inside it are water, and the name of the game is to keep as much water in your bucket as you possibly can. But you've got holes in your bucket. Some holes you might know about, some holes you might not know about. The more holes you've got in your bucket, the more employees are going to leave. And so the aim of a retention strategy is understanding those holes, finding those holes, seeking those holes out, and then plugging those holes so that we can stop that kind of stem of flow of water employees out of the organisation. If you're still with me with the leaky bucket analogy, brilliant, thanks very much. Hopefully it kind of works, and I'll keep kind of referring to the leaky bucket as we go through. Okay, so let's kind of talk about employee engagement then. So, as I say, actually, the idea with the retention strategy and me focusing on employee engagement when it comes to a retention strategy is really about prevention better than the cure. So kind of thinking about that timeline, really kind of stopping anybody from even thinking about resigning is the best place to be, stopping people even kind of getting disengaged in the first place, and building positive employee engagement is where we need to be. So this is an employee engagement model that we use in Space HR. Really straightforward, really kind of simple, and kind of clear. And what I'm actually going to do in the next couple of slides is kind of pose some questions around each of these areas that really, what I'm hoping is it'll start to make you think of, do I have holes in my bucket here? Do I have a leaky bucket? Is this a gap for us, and do we need to be kind of focusing on that? And if the answer is yes, that's when it goes into a retention strategy. If the answer is no, fantastic, that's kind of a strength in your organisation. If the answer is I'm not sure, that's really where employee feedback comes in. When you really do, I would encourage you to go and seek that feedback from employees to know, how are we doing in this area? Are we doing good enough here? Is this a reason why you might leave the organisation? Is this an engaging point for you? Is this a disengaging point for you? Okay, so really broadly, so connection then on employee engagement, this is about employees feeling connected to the organisation, vision, mission, values, etc. They understand where you're going and why. Fulfillment, this is about feeling personally fulfilled in their role. So, great challenge, career development, work-life blend, etc. Leaders, they've got leaders who inspire them and push them, develop them and support them. They've got great relationships with their leaders. And then well-being, this is about feeling safe and secure in the workplace, both physically and psychologically. We put diversity and inclusion under there from a kind of psychological safety perspective. Okay, so let's dig in a bit deeper. So thinking about connection then, and again, the purpose of me asking these questions is to get you to think about, have I got a leaky bucket? Have we got a gap here? And if we do, what should we be doing in order to close that gap and plug our hole in our leaky bucket? So connection then, so that's about feeling connected to the organisation. You understand the direction of travel, you really kind of buy into the values, etc. So some of the questions in here are teams clear on the vision? Are teams clear on the vision, or is it just a slide on an induction programme that never gets mentioned again? Do they understand the vision and where it's going? Are employees clear on the goals and how they can contribute to the goals of the organisation? And this is so much more than that kind of annual performance review, let's cascade down some objectives. That's not what I'm talking about. This is about every single day, do employees understand the contribution that they are making to that vision and that general direction of travel, and the contribution that they are making. And really this kind of sits with leaders, people leaders. So are they really clear on the goals? Are your values meaningful? Or again, are they a slide in your induction program, onboarding program, and never to be mentioned again? We know that Gen Z, for example, are incredibly, who are coming into the workplace now, are an incredibly values-led generation. That's not to say that other generations aren't, but this is going to be, values are going to become even more prevalent as we as more and more Gen Z come into the organisation. It's going to be really important. And then, do they have a voice in your organisation? This is obviously I advocate for, and I would really encourage anonymous employee feedback surveys. That's what I do. But this is also, it's about that. It's about, feeling able to share ideas, to share concerns, and that feeling safe for them, and that feeling obvious to them how they can do that in your organisation. So then thinking about fulfilment, so this is about personal fulfilment in the role and in the workplace. So, thinking about reward and salaries, etc. I don't think it would be a retention plan unless we were thinking about salaries, etc. externally. And a lot of that is the reason why employees are leaving. But I want to kind of throw another thought around salaries and reward in there, in that fairness is one of the core values that we find that employees are really looking for, regardless of whether you've got fairness on your kind of values board or whatever. If it whether it's kind of called out or not, actually it's a given. It's almost kind of in that hierarchy of needs. Employees are looking for fairness, and throwing kind of big salaries and yes, we need to be competitive in order to retain our talent or retain or attract talent. But I would really encourage you not to lose sight of the fact that fairness is also going to come into play there. And it's really super easy to lose sight of the fairness element of rewards and recognition, of reward packages when we're starting to compete for big salaries externally, and that fairness element is such a key driver for engagement that I would encourage you to kind of not lose sight of that. Next, you have a culture of recognition. Again, my kind of key point here is recognition starts at a thank you, and you would be probably maybe surprised, I don't know, at the number of comments that we get in our surveys about saying thank you from leaders, and I'd kind of really encourage you not to forget that element of recognition, and to make sure that you're starting there before you go in, kind of dishing out prizes, etc. Make sure that those thank yous are in place. So people who want career paths, are they open to them? Are they supported? Is it obvious and are they able to build a career in your organisation? Are they able to leave your organisation in a better place than where they joined? And is autonomy part of the culture for your organisation? Do they, or is it a micromanagement culture? We know, we can see in the data and in our feedback surveys that autonomy is a huge kind of ask for employees, and we can really see that coming through in some of the feedback data that we get in surveys, that's a biggie for employees. So then thinking about leadership, so in our surveys, what we often do is pull out a leadership layer and anybody who's a people manager, because we really believe that those people managers need to be personally engaged in order to ensure that they are engaging their teams. And that's really, really key. So, we need to make sure that they are bringing out the best in their teams, but they can only do that when they are personally engaged. I don't believe that you can be an engaging leader without personally being engaged. So kind of making sure that your leadership team are in a great place and ready to be engaging. Do they have high trust relationships with their teams? Again, trust is one of those really kind of core unwritten values often that we see across all organisations that is being really key to engagement. So are those high trust relationships there? And do they support personal development? And again, are employees leaving the organisation in a better place than where they joined, and have they experienced growth, and did their leaders support and encourage that whilst they were there? And then finally, well-being. So is your culture focused on diversity, inclusion, belonging? Is it a safe space in your organisation to be who you want to be, and to kind of bring your true self to work? Again, this is, if the answer to that is I don't know or no, then that can be a real push factor for employees, that they increasingly, quite rightly, need to kind of feel a sense of belonging in an organisation. It's so important to how that feels, the culture, the engagement, and so kind of really focusing on, is this a culture of diversity, inclusion and belonging? Do employees feel supported and cared for? Genuinely feel supported and cared for? Do they believe that you would do the right thing by them? Do they feel safe at work? So physically safe in the workplace? That kind of hierarchy of needs is kind of right down at the bottom, where they feel safe at work. And are they valued as individuals? So again, can they bring their whole selves to work? But are they valued as individuals, and the contribution that they make, and is it recognised and valued who they are? Okay, so maybe you've got some kind of thoughts and of some gaps and some holes that are open in your leaky bucket. I'm going to complicate things a little bit more now, because these are some great things that we need to be doing, but also there is that kind of eye on the future of the workplace that we also really need to be thinking about, because we need to be thinking about, are we, when we're creating a retention strategy, is it fit for the future? Are we creating a place where future employees want to come as well? And actually, can we get ahead of the game? So if we know the direction of travel of where the workplace is going, does that help us to kind of, again, identify gaps and work that we might need to be doing, even if it's longer term, of evolving our workplace to make sure that we aren't storing up future retention risks for employees? So here's some of the things that I kind of wanted to pull out that I think that organisations need to be focusing on at the moment. So work anywhere, anytime. There's so much noise out there at the moment about flexible, hybrid, remote working, etc. I think by now we've probably got the point that if your organisation can work in this way, you should be working in this way. And if you can work in this way and aren't working in this way, I would suspect that's a major retention risk for you right now. Very much linked to that kind of hybrid, flexible, remote working point, but focusing on outputs and not inputs, and this real kind of change in leadership, and this real movement away from kind of that managerial style of leadership, if you like, and more towards kind of true leadership. And I think we really kind of need to be supporting and reinvesting in leaders to evolve their leadership style and make sure that it is fit for the future workplace. And we need to be doing that now. Thinking about kind of careers and what that might look like. I really think there's going to be, in the future, the workplace is going to be very different in terms of its shape. So I think we'll see less of this kind of corporate ladder, join at the bottom, work your way up to the top. I think we will see more kind of portfolio careers, so people who are working for more than one organisation. There's been a real increase in freelancers over the pandemic, and I think we'll continue to see that that changing. So, you know, for kind of HR teams out there, we might find that the scope of the roles is kind of, looking at the workforce and workplace, it's yes, there will always be employees, I'm sure, but there might also be these other kind of people that we need to engage that dip in and out of the organisation in different ways. And I think we'll start to see that in increasing amounts. And then this kind of sharing knowledge. So I've kind of put on this slide here that knowledge isn't power, collaboration is, and you know, knowledge isn't power anymore because knowledge is out there freely, and you know, Google kind of put an end to knowledge being power, really. But you know, kind of creating that collaborative environment is a real key kind of element of any healthy culture, and that's what employees are going to be looking for, and that's going to become increasingly prevalent. And we need to make sure that we are creating the right environment for collaboration, and that we are that we're creating we're giving employees team technology in order to support collaboration as well. And I, you know, again, I think this will be a key part of a culture that employees will just leave if it's not for them. Everyone being a leader, again, this kind of ties into the collaboration point, but you know, particularly Gen Z who are coming into the organisation, they aren't they're not fans of the hierarchy. So you know, if they've got a great idea, they expect that to be taken, and quite rightly, you know, that's kind of where innovation can really thrive in an organisation. But stopping that kind of top down cascade of, you know, that hierarchy, and that everybody becoming a leader, and how that might change and shift culture and engagement in our organisations. And then finally, a piece about learning. So you know, that what we're seeing is in the kind of TikTok era that learning is more bite-sized. It happens on the go, it happens organically, it happens in really short kind of pieces and bursts, and we're seeing kind of that classroom-based learning starting to tail off a little bit. And I think that will happen more and more freely. And again, employees will come to expect that. They'll come to expect being able to kind of freely learn in an organisation and access that freely. So again, I hope that that's given you some kind of thoughts around that retention plan, some of the future direction of travel, some of the things that you might need to be thinking about in the future for your retention strategy. And, you know, how can technology help? So I've kind of talked about some of that collaboration tech, you know, things like Miro or Slack or Trello, Teams. You know, we need to be giving employees these collaboration tools because that's how they're expecting and how they enjoy working, but also giving them great devices to use that on. Having a HRIS system that you know, creates great employee experiences, and using that kind of tech to drive a great experience for employees that we know then drives employee engagement. And of course, this is the work that I do, but I would, you know, really having that kind of employee feedback platform so that you can really put employee feedback at the heart of the organisation and really tap into what is going on in engagement, what's going on in engagement in individual teams or individual demographics, and what does that mean in terms of what we need to do next, and an engagement plan. Woo! So key takeaways then. So resignations are painful. Retention is solved through engagement, and that prevention is absolutely better than the cure. That the workplace is changing, and that if you are thinking about retention plan, that you should be thinking about that for the future and not just for now. And that tech can help, and using tech to create great experiences for your employees, and using feedback as that kind of continual blood through the organisation to kind of make sure that you're doing the right things, and that as things shift and change, that you're on top of that, and that you understand exactly what is going on in your teams. Okay, so that's it. So please do keep in touch. I'll put our website up there. There's a really great kind of blog section on there. We do a lot of fresh writing on all things engagement, retention, performance. So go and check out our blog. You can check me out, Victoria Bond, on LinkedIn. Please come and find me on LinkedIn. That's my email address if you'd like to get in touch. The HR Directors Cut podcast, as I said, you can find that on wherever you find your podcasts. And finally, we do a small piece of research every so often in Space HR, where we send out 5 quick questions on employee engagement every other month, and it's packed full of kind of HR leaders, business leaders, who give us their kind of thoughts and opinions on what's happening on employee engagement at that point in time. And if you want to join as part of that research group, then I would love to have you in there. Please just kind of hold up your phone to that QR code, and it'll step you through an onboarding process. You should be able to take part in our next survey. So thank you very much. Hopefully I've given you enough information that if you do have any questions after this, or you want to keep the conversation going, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks very much for listening.